I caught up with Professor Hocking earlier, where I began by asking how she reflects on her role in achieving a greater awareness and clarity about this chapter of our nation's history.
It's a great honour. It's very humbling, of course. And I think it's a very timely reflection on just how important archives and open access to archives are to our history and to understanding our history. And we know that with an area as complex and contested as the dismissal of the Whitlam government, so much of the archives was actually closed to us. So, you know, it's been a very long campaign, really, to open, in particular, the Queen's letters to the Governor-General, Sir John Kerr. And, you know, there was a great team behind that. We had a wonderful legal team that worked with me on a pro bono basis, and of course many other supporters all around the country who just felt that if we didn't have access to these critical letters, how could we possibly know the full story of the dismissal of the Whitlam government? So I'm delighted that the significance of archives is, I consider, being recognised here, and how important it is that the Australian Archives continues to open its royal records.
Well, may we say, God save the Queen. Because nothing will save the Governor-General.
As a historian yourself and as someone that has spent a lot of your life focused on this, give us your view as to why the lessons of not just the dismissal, but I know that you've recently been writing on correspondence between other Governor-Generals or Governors-General and Her Majesty recently. Why is that important to look at that history and those comparisons?
Well, what we now know, and really it wasn't, I think, widely known until we took this legal action to secure the letters from the National Archives, is just how widespread royal secrecy is. I mean, it's quite extraordinary that there's a whole mass of material between any member of the royal family, particularly the monarch, and others, which is routinely closed to public access by the Australian Archives. And that's really been the case across the Commonwealth, and that's what makes our legal action in the Palace Letters case just so dramatic. And so we can't possibly tell our history, our full history, if we don't have access to the documents that would tell it to us. And, you know, what we've had for really hundreds of years now is a closure of royal materials, which means that our history is written in a very distorted way. It's written in such a way that the activities of the monarch simply don't appear within it because we do not know. And it's interesting at this particular point with this award today that the very well-known Index on Censorship organisation in the UK, their latest campaign is in fact around royal secrecy, and it's calling for the opening of archives in the UK and in the Commonwealth countries, and my case is featured in that latest issue because it just doesn't fit with our notions of open government and democracy, and it does need to be looked at again.
And one of the other things that, just drawing on that answer, I guess, is accountability for the Governor-General themselves. When you look at the amount of correspondence that John Kerr undertook with Buckingham Palace vis-a-vis some of his successors.
Yeah, look, we not only gained access to the success of this case in 2020, and it was an emphatic result of the High Court 6-1, saying that these letters between the Queen, our head of state, and our Governor-General are not personal. They ought to be open for public access. But we not only gained access to Kerr's letters, and as you say, there are hundreds of them over a little more than a 3-year period, but we also gained access, which were released about this time last year, in fact, to the records of all Governors-General to and from the Queen, going back to Lord Casey in the 1960s, all the way back to Sir William Dean. So, you know, there are 6 extraordinary set of letters there that all Australians now can know and read. And what we see is a really fascinating shift in the dynamic between the viceregal correspondence from, say, Casey and Kerr all the way to Bill Dean. Bill Dean really puts it on a much more almost a level of equality between writing to the Queen and receiving her replies, whereas Kerr, of course, in Malcolm Turnbull's famous phrase, exhibits a grovelling sycophancy in the way he writes to the Queen, and he writes many, many more letters, hundreds of letters over a 3-year period compared to over only, say, 30 letters from Sir Ninian Stephen during his much longer period in office. So the Kerr letters stand out, they're unique, they're an extremely important part of our understanding of the dismissal, and they really put paid to the notion that the Queen had no involvement and was not aware of Kerr's activities. They discussed that prospect for more than 2 months before the dismissal.
And one of the fundamental points with a constitutional monarchy, and this is something you've said over a number of years, is that neutrality, isn't it? That the monarch be and its representative be neutral. And that was something that from the first correspondence, you argue, was breached by Kerr.
Look, absolutely. And this is really, quite startling. I knew a lot about the letters, obviously, before we were able to access them because of the amount of material I'd already located in Kerr's papers and elsewhere. That's formed really the basis, I think, the empirical basis of our case. But I was still just shocked at the extent to which Kerr undermined the government of the day, which had only just appointed him that year in 1974, repeatedly, and even more so by the way in which the Queen's Private Secretary, Sir Martin Charteris, engaged with him in that sort of conversation, which was anything but neutral. And that really is the problem with all of this, is that the public narrative that the palace continues to claim that we are politically neutral, we do not get involved in domestic political matters, and they've repeated that even after the letters came out, is simply not true. But it's only when we look at the files that have previously been kept secret from us that we become aware of that. And I think it's interesting with the advent of King Charles III, our new monarch, and to ask whether he can stand back from the required neutrality, even publicly, because he has, of course, previously been very open in his political views and made no secret of them.
Emeritus Professor Jenny Hocking, AM, congratulations on your honour once again. And, huge thanks as well to all your work done over many years. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for speaking to me, Kieran. I appreciate that.